my first business was actually called Big Decks Australia. The slogan on the t-shirt was "Everyone wants a big deck." It was a really successful little business. I had the cool business cards. I had every bit of merch that you could possibly think of. Singlets that said "Call me if you want a big deck" with my like disgraceful, really.
What is success to you?
I think it was a learn to love it experience.
And there's always pitfalls that you can fall in, but then you've got no one else to blame but yourself.
Number one thing if you're struggling is to catch other people about it.
Hey guys, before we kick off, I just wanted to take a quick second to say thanks to our content partners, Abodo. You probably know Abodo from their featured timbers like cladding, decking, screening, and all those beautiful timbers that make our projects look amazing. Now, on top of all that, Abodo timber is actually grown and manufactured right here in New Zealand, and it's actually verified carbon negative. Now, what the heck is carbon negative? I'm going to be honest with you, I had to Google that. Carbon negative means Abodo actually takes more carbon out of the air than it puts in. That's got to be good, right? For the environment at least. Cheers, Abodo. You guys are actually legends. Now, let's kick off this episode. Marshal Keen, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Like we were just saying off air, I came across you. I think you were doing something for ArchiPro. You were on. You're going to be on their panel next week, or by the time this comes out, probably would have been a week before. But yeah, so that's exciting.
Yeah, it is. It's really exciting. I'm looking forward to the panel and the questions that the clients or what's the word I'm looking for? The audience are going to ask us.
Yeah, because they're like people that want to build homes, right? And there's like a saying that goes, an educated client is a well-behaved client. Have you heard that?
I like that. I like that.
And so, so a big part is educating the end users how the building process works, right?
Oh, it is. I always say that the best client is a previously dissatisfied client. And it goes the other way. We've had clients that we've done work for, bent over backwards for, but they're first time clients or first time builders. We've gone out of our way. They haven't realized the lengths that we've gone to. They've done a second build with someone who doesn't go to those same lengths. I've had multiple times. I've had phone calls or text messages apologizing and thanking me for the work that we did on the first one and wishing that we were the builders on the second one because they didn't realize how lucky they were.
I love those phone calls, You're just like, yeah,
it's good. It's good.
Told you should have gone with us. Yeah, those are great. Okay. Well, I want to, let's rewind a little bit. I want to hear a bit about where you grew up, and sort of how you got into the building game. But when you were a child, where did you grow up? Did you grow up around Sydney or?
I grew up on the Gold Coast.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So very cool place to grow up. I didn't really have any aspiration to be a builder. My father, he was a builder. I actually was, like we were talking previously, I was actually a rugby player. So I say that. I wasn't a very good one because I didn't make it, but I played a bit. And I was going to uni, going down the uni path. And then just one day I actually wrote in some notes what I wanted to achieve, and I had a visa to go to Canada. I sat in with my mum for coffee and was going over all the pros and cons in this journal that I'd written out, and it just came down to it that I thought I wanted to do carpentry. So I canned the trip to Canada.
Wow.
Started my carpentry apprenticeship as a 23-year-old. And whilst doing that, I did my builder's license at night. So
cool. And was that on the Gold Coast?
That was on the Gold Coast.
And did you still play rugby as well at the same time?
Oh, I stopped.
You stopped there?
Yeah, I stopped.
And what position were you rugby?
Scrum half.
Oh, I love it.
Very annoying.
Yeah.
Very annoying
I
scrum
have
half.
yet to meet a scrum half that's not very annoying.
Yeah, it comes with the territory.
You guys all learned from George Gregan back in the day.
Very much so.
Copying him in every way you can.
Every way.
Okay, very cool. Sorry about the rugby at the moment for you guys.
Diabolical.
Yeah. Sorry, but you guys are building back, so you guys can only go one way.
Well, there's only one way to go.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, cool. So Gold Coast must have been cool growing up on the Gold Coast, right? Did you do a lot of surfing and all that?
A lot of surfing.
Yeah.
I grew up in a place called Paradise Point, which is the northern end of the Gold Coast, and it's a little boating community. So I grew up, going fishing, crabbing out in our tinny, wakeboarding, surfing, taking the tinny over to Stradbroke Island, surfing. If you're a surfer, you know Stradbroke Island. But the only way to get there is either paddle across the seaway or by boat. So we just had a direct line from our jetty off our house straight to Stradbroke.
The dream.
Amazing.
Probably not even packed day because not a lot of guys can get out there.
Yeah.
So why on earth did you move into Sydney? Tell me about that.
I sort of went through some personal stuff, went through a divorce, didn't really want to build on the Gold Coast anymore. So I moved into the oil and gas industry. Was living out of Bali. So again, I tended to chase the waves. And I was working throughout Asia and off the Western Australian coastline doing offshore construction, which was a great experience. Did a 5-week stint on a boat in the Timor Sea on the Bayou-Uden pipeline, and wrote an email to my brother who was in Sydney and said, I'm thinking about doing this again in Sydney. What do you think? So he invited me to stay with him for a few months while I set myself up, and that was in 2015.
Cool. And so the oil and gas game, so was that, I'm imagining you're out there shirtless, oil on you, just doing some stuff, I've seen the videos. Is that not quite right?
That's not quite right.
Some woman's fantasy or something. Or gay guy's fantasy.
Look, it's a really interesting industry. Something that was really took me by surprise. The thing that got me was the number of qualified people that were out there, and there's a small select bunch of highly intelligent professionals, engineers, all the sort of ship's crew. But then you've got this eclectic group of, I'll say misfits for less of a better word, where it might be the guys from the rugby team that run the rigging on all the boats for the crane operations. So they get all their mates in to run the rigging operation. So Deepwater Horizon is about the most accurate, accurate display of how it actually unfolds.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
it's kind of misfits, like some dude with a ponytail and like some other guy that's some real obscure backgrounds, right?
There's this guy that lives in Thailand, and or this guy who's from in Norway. Like it's wild. The people you meet, some wonderful people, like wonderful misfits.
Yeah, love it.
Yeah, it's great.
So it's like the opposite of like your, the office cubicle lifestyle. Like exact opposite.
Could not be more opposite.
Yeah. So, okay. So then why, and I assume that you get paid well because it's danger pay and you're like in the middle of nowhere half the time, right?
You do. Look, you get paid. You do get paid well, particularly because of the type of people that they recruit for a lot of these jobs. So we were doing construction works, which predominantly was cement work on the subsea floor. So you're working with the guys that run the ROVs, the robotic submarines, and then we have like a concrete pump basically that pumps down subsea stabilization for pipelines that are spanning too far and not touching the ocean floor, or if they're putting in a big manifold for one of the gas lines and it sucks down into the seabed, it can't have air in a portion, so you might have to pump it full of concrete. It's wild work.
I've always wondered how they get those structures in the middle of the ocean. You know what I mean? I'm not going to ask you. You're going to have to explain to a 5-year-old.
Massive cranes, big barges, huge amounts of people. Like the money associated with it is astronomical.
Yeah. And why did you decide then to move? Is it always going to be one of those things where there's like it has a shelf life, a limited time? You can't do it forever, sort of thing.
I think so. Like for me, it was so hot on the boat. We were working in the belly of a construction vessel. There was not a breath of wind. My shift was 12 midnight to 12 midday, and I was doing that for 5 weeks. So it's outside of Australian sort of maritime law. So there was different regulations that applied for what we could do, and we were thankful to do it because of the money. I would have stayed there for another 5 weeks, but I would have gone crazy in the process.
What do you do in your time off? So you have 12 hours that you have off, right? So then
yeah.
what do you do?
So I would train on my lunch break. So I would finish my shift, finish my shift, train on my lunch break, go and eat quickly, and then again, it depended on what you were doing because the cost of the equipment that they're using, you may not even get a lunch break for that 12-hour shift just because you have to, it would cost too much to shut down. So if you have that break, have the half hour, then go back to work. After work, I'd train again. I'd then go back to my room, do some stretching, some yoga, whatever, just because it's so hard to sleep at 12 noon in the afternoon as well.
Right, you had to calm yourself down.
So you have to calm yourself down. I'd read a book and I'd always work on sleep cycles. It would be like 1 or 2 hours sleep. And my body I'd just be tossing and turning. And then it would go to like an additional hour, maybe 3 to 4. 5 to 6, and then you'd go revert back. So once you'd caught up on that amount of sleep, you'd revert back to the 1 to 2. So it was basically torture.
I can imagine, right?
It was horrible.
During the day, and what are you in like a little room or?
You're in a room, and there's no daylight coming into that room. It's just your body clock is just so thrown out. I mean, some people maybe they can adjust to it. I couldn't.
Right.
So.
And is there anything socially, like could you do it, is there anything fun? Do you have pool tables out there or something? Or what do you do to like entertain yourself or not?
Well, look, there is. There's a games room and you could watch movies in the games room. The ships that you're on are quite extraordinary, really. They're beautiful. That particular boat was a Norwegian vessel and it was amazing. The food is next level. So you like beautiful cuts of sirloin steak, fresh salmon, prawns. We had lobster on one. Like the food is unbelievable. But I was training because I like to eat, and I put on weight with training. I think the average weight increase in a 6-month period is something like 20 kilograms for a guy or something over a 6. It's outrageous how much weight people put on because they can eat as much as they want on these boats. It's very
dream, eh?
Well, it's great. But yeah. Look, there's a lot of good things about it as well.
The yoga gets a bit harder towards the end of the trip.
You can't quite bend over your guts.
Okay, cool. So then you decided to come back. And then you just sort of straight, because I assume you come back, you decide you're just going to start your own company, or how does that work?
Yeah, well, so the company had never shut down, so as far as I guess the tax office was concerned.
Yeah, but but previously it was on the Gold Coast, and now you're transitioning.
Right. Yeah. So look, I transferred my licenses to New South Wales. I then, I worked for another builder initially just to see how I liked it, getting to know sort of even just how to get around Sydney as well for the jobs, predominantly eastern suburbs. And then, I went, all right, I'm going to do my own thing. And I essentially reverted back to what I had done when I started my company up in Queensland. Actually, you know what? I didn't revert back. I took about 15 steps back from where I was there. So I was digging out the side of semis, or houses, getting them back, getting the waterproofers in, the worst possible job that you could think of. And I'd gone from building massive luxury homes to doing these jobs that were very labor intensive, but it was kind of nice as well because it was part of the process. And the business event literally just evolved from that to, someone gave me a shot and gave me an apartment renovation. I then reverted the skills back that I'd done from what I was doing in Queensland with the quality of work. And then that was word of mouth, referral, and it just kind of has created this bit of a beast that we're in now.
And how long did it take you then? So you obviously had to hire some guys to come help you out. And I guess every time you got a better job, you'd probably hire another guy, a couple of guys. How long did it take you before you could get off the tools? Was that quite a period? Yeah,
it would have taken about 4 years, 4 or 5 years. I'd say 2020, everything kind of changed. I mean, that was COVID year as well. I got cancer in that year as well, which was a wild one. And that almost, as much as it was a negative, it was almost a positive because it forced that change for off the tools. So while I was having treatment and stuff, I had guys doing the work, and then it just sort of cemented my role back into that overseeing project management builder type role, as opposed to the nail bag on. If I put my nail bag on now and I go to site, I'm immediately told by the foreman to remove it.
I've seen guys do it like they're like on their phone trying to drill something with their left hand, and
Yeah, it's great.
just ruin
It's
everything
like,
for everyone
do
else.
Not, like, I often make the joke. I'm like, do as I say, don't do as I do. And whilst I appreciate my skill set with certain things, the team that we have are incredible at their job as well. If I come along and start, it will not end well. So
Those scenarios, people start looking at each other like, "Whoa, why is he here?"
Yeah, that's it. Why is he here? And he told me not to do it that way, and he's doing it that way.
So, would you say cancer fast tracked your timeline of getting off the tools?
Yeah, it did. It did. It's funny how you can have something that's so negative, but yet so many positives come from it. As it's pretty remarkable, really.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a horrendous thing, right? Cancer. And where you at now? Are you
Fine. It's like rearview mirror.
Wow. And what was that experience like? I mean, if you wouldn't mind, you don't have to talk about it, obviously, but what was that experience like in terms of like perspective on life?
It certainly puts things in perspective. The initial diagnosis was don't tell anybody, really. I didn't want, I was like, look, I want to have all the information before I face it. A lot of disbelief, don't accept it. It's not real. I never researched it. So when I went in to have my first chemo treatment, I didn't even know what chemo was. I had no idea. Changing mindset from it being poison they're putting into me to the best day ever. So chemo days, I would put music on, walk down Bondi Beach, listen to tunes, get back to my apartment, put tunes on, jump around, dance around. Like, this is the best day ever. This is medicine day. So that was a really cool way of changing my perspective of life, I guess. But I think what people don't appreciate builders go through is there is such an incredible amount of stress that comes with our job. I do put the illness down to stress, as well as other things, obviously. But the scariest part about the time when I was having my treatment is it was the most stress-free period of my adult life. So, putting that in perspective, it's really, and even now when I get really busy with work and I start getting back to that state, I'm like, hang on, you were less stressed when you were fighting cancer.
And so was that like a revelation to you at the time? Did you just only realize at that time how stressed you were while you were running your business? And
yeah, I think it's one of those things that just kind of compounds. It kind of, so you're stressed, but I think eventually your body tells you just how stressed you are. But again, that forced change for a new role, it forces change to do things a different way. And I think within business, that's it. It's delegating tasks to the right people. Because if I'm doing a task that I know someone else can do it better, I'll get that person. I'll use their strengths. Not taking everything on. Like, if you're at the top of the tree, you're sort of taking the majority of it on. But how can you manage taking that on without absorbing it all?
yeah, there's almost like that sort of decision making, and like problem solving and decision making. You only get, I don't know if that's true or not, but I assume you only get like a certain amount that you can sort of handle in a day or whatever.
Yeah.
And so even though you still take responsibility for the whole business and it's still on your shoulders, right? But it's just that element of like the compound effect of like little problem solve, little or big problems you need to solve. If you could pass that on to someone else, and there's like another thing you don't have to think about, it helps.
That's articulated perfectly in the sense that the biggest revelation, and this is probably this is in the last year, 12 months. You're at critical mass. when you're running an organization, and I don't think it matters whether you're a builder or whether you're running a company that's completely unrelated to construction. There's certain tasks, like it might be, look, we need to get that report over to that person. That task, as long as you're across the report, I think that's where your focus needs to be. You got to be across the report before it's sent, so things aren't being sent out blindly. I look at my day, my phone starts ringing at 6:30 in the morning. It doesn't stop ringing until 6:30 at night, and often later. But I have to choose the tasks that are the most important. For me, it's client relationships. So if a client calls me, then I will answer the phone. I need to have that time to be able and prioritize them. I need to make sure that my team are prioritized as well. If they call me and they need something, but also there becomes a human side with the team itself where you can't just run it like a machine. Otherwise, there's social issues that will come into play that I don't want anything to do with my organization. So it's about prioritizing the team, the clients, and then delegating the other tasks that you need to be across, but not taking on too much.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely the higher value top tasks, right? That are the most important. Look after your client, to look after your staff, to make sure things are cash flow and all that sort of stuff, right? That you got to keep your eyes across and delegate as much as you can to the other guys in terms of the smaller stuff. So in terms of, you say it's stressful, your phone starts ringing and rings all day. Do you ever, or have you ever in the past sort of been overwhelmed by it all?
I wouldn't say I've ever been overwhelmed. There's always a tipping point, like I've just had a child, like my first child, and he's 5
Congrats.
months old. Thank you.
Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, that puts things in perspective as well. That's what I'm doing it for. It makes you realize, what we're all here for. As long as I've got the time to spend with him, or what I do have to catch myself on is if I'm busy, stopping myself, because that is the most important thing. But again, if I'm not doing this, I can't support that. So yeah, that balance. The lack of sleep lately has been testing. I will but there's always a way to make, nothing annoys me more than people say, oh, I'm overwhelmed and I can't make it happen. I shouldn't be overwhelmed because I've got people, as we're talking about, to delegate to. That you can always hand little bits and pieces off that are sort of tipping the scales too far one way.
Yeah. A lot of builders are, running a construction business is very complicated. There's a lot of moving parts. It's not under the category of a straightforward, simple business to run. Guys get, they work themselves, sometimes they, do like 60, 70-hour weeks, and the stress on top of that, and the phone keeps ringing. What are some practical sort of things you may have done in the past, Marshall, in terms of how you sort of deal with that potential overwhelm or stress that kind of builds up critical mass, as you say? Like, how have you been able to deal with that on a practical level?
Look, on a practical level, I think I was always very active, like training. That was an outlet. As I'm getting older, I'm 44 years old now. I've found that harder because of the physical exhaustion. That's a big one for me, is I can't train like I used to because of my age, so it's trying to figure that out. But I think getting space around you is a huge stress relief. Particularly living in the cities that we live in, we're all over the top of one another. So, sometimes like just a 5-minute walk down the beach, be out in the open air, look at the waves, look at the ocean. That's a big stress reliever for me. On the back end of managing the stress as well is adopting systems within the business that help to relieve that stress. And I think the single largest stress that we have revolves around money, and the ability to pay our bills. the construction industry is very different to every other industry. You have guys that are straight out of school, do their apprenticeships, are good at their trade. The business grows. They've had no business training whatsoever. And then all of a sudden they've got a business that's turning over huge amounts of money. They've got, they essentially should have a HR department because they've got huge, it's a very, very different business to everything else. There's no hierarchical system that you crawl your way up as you progress through your career. So I think it is really hard for builders in this space. Message to clients, understand that it's a really hard job. We're dealing with emotion from your end on probably your greatest asset or investment. And the guys are generally doing their best to pull it together. But there's a lot of external factors on a human side that we all need to consider.
Yeah. It's funny how you say you got to, your system's right. You got to give space. I like how you said that. You got to give space because it's almost like a metaphorical, but also a physical thing you got to do. Went for a walk on the beach a few weeks ago, and then you sort of look around at everyone else going for, it's like 11 a.m. on a Tuesday. You see everyone else walking. It's like you all walk alone. Where it's like, oh, it looks to me like we're all in the same boat here, guys. People just staring into the distance, like rethinking their life or whatever. Just kind of like needing to give give that space, right? And if you wanna not feel like you're the only person going through some shit, go for a walk on the beach in the middle of the day and look around, see who else is there. They all the same boat, So yeah, no, that's very important to be able to kind of make space and obviously delegate as well to your team. So how do you? I looked at your Instagram yesterday and this morning, and I see you do like little staff profiles. But then what I found quite interesting, quite different, is like you're in each photo, like you'll sort of like, hey, here's Johnny, and then you're like in the photo with him. And that, I thought that was so cool because, normally builders just be like, oh, or the social media person's got to be like, oh, we got to just do some team profiles, people like that. But there was some genuine element to it when you're like in the photo with them, make them feel comfortable. Say, hey, I'm also here in the photo with you. I'm with you. I know you don't want to do this.
Yeah, they're generally kicking and screaming.
Yeah. So I'll be in the photo with you, making it easier on you, How do you sort of build that company culture? And also, before I ask this question as well, I must say as well, shout out to your team. Most of those guys are ripped, right? I've seen some photos.
You saw that photo?
Yeah. I was like, jeepers, who are these male models?
That photo broke the internet.
You should have a calendar or something, mate. You should sell a calendar because I was like, jeepers, these guys turned me, That was just one of those remarkable moments. They were working at the back of this property, very good looking roosters, and I just said, guys, I've got to get a photo of this. This is unbelievable. And they literally had the jackhammers and sledgehammers in their hands and turned around, and it was snap, bang, and I actually found it really interesting because we had a bit of a joke about it with the boys. Some of the comments that we were like, as men, if we wrote those comments, we would be hung out to dry. But we had clients that were saying, oh, I need a light bulb change. Swore I was never going to build again. Marshal, if you're sending those boys over, come on. I definitely need some work done around the house. Or women out there ready to sign paperwork.
Yeah,
They're like,
Channel 9 picked it up.
Oh, really?
And ran an article on it as well. Yeah.
That is so. Well, shout out to the boys. You guys, you're a good looking bunch of fellas and very ripped. So that's good. It's good to know. So if people look at, hiring you guys, it's going to be some eye candy walking around. So that's good. It's
not the first time, actually. I had another, we used to do some event stuff. And I sent my old apprentice and another one of the boys who was just helping out. I can say that it was for a National Australia Bank company do. Anyway, the boys got up. There was Hunter Valley. It was super hot. So they were just unloading the truck. So they've taken their shirts off. So I got a phone call off one of the heads of marketing or whatever. And I thought we're in trouble. And she's like, Marshall, who are these boys that you've sent up? And I said, oh, sorry if they done something wrong. She goes, no. She said, the rest of the site has shut down. I can't get anybody to do any work. She's like, you guys are hired forever as long as I'm in this role, provided you send those two boys up.
Mate, you better be paying for these guys' gym memberships, you know. Otherwise, you better start, keep, this is going to make you more money, mate, you know. Okay, that's good to hear. So off the back of that, how do you, outside of the abs and the biceps and the triceps around the place, how do you give, in the compliments, how do you keep company culture positive? How do you build the culture? How do you do it? Because it's incredibly hard. I've seen builders try, from scratch, trying to build a vibe. It's incredibly difficult. It's like herding cats. What are some of the things that are important to you and that you've sort of implemented in terms of making sure that there's a good bunch of guys working together nicely?
The funny thing is, this one doesn't come as difficult for me, and I get asked this quite a lot. How do you sort of get such a good team? One, it's the individuals that are working with us. Obviously the full credit goes to the guys themselves. How do we sort of harbour it and foster it or maintain that level of professionalism and positivity? I just tell them they're doing a really good job, and I tell them every day. So, which also means if I have to be hard on them for something, it's never done in a way where they're being belittled or being made to feel small. They're pulled aside and spoken to like adults. And I'd accept the same from them. If I did something that upset them, there's a culture there where they can talk to me, or if someone, a foreman is nasty to an apprentice or anything, which doesn't happen, but if it did happen, they can come and talk to me, and I'll iron it out. They also know that I'm fiercely loyal to them. So if there's a supplier or if there's a third-party contractor that comes on board and there's I'll call it an attack on them, they know I've got their back. And it's a team. We're all in it together. Yeah.
I love that, just kind of it normally comes from top, to be really honest. Shit flows downhill or whatever that saying is. The opposite's true as well. If the leader has the right attitude and approach and vibe, it generally flows down to the team members. And also they hire, like you say, they end up hiring the right type team members as well. And it comes down to the individuals. So let's talk about your company a little bit. Built by MK, which is Marshal Keen. That's you. Tell me a little bit about how many guys you've got, because people are quite interested, builders are interested, because you guys aren't notorious for sharing a lot of information about your companies to each other, apart from just knowing that sign written utes and that sort of stuff. You know what I mean? How many guys you got? Normally the first question. Yeah. So basically, let's start there then. How many guys have you got, Marshall, and what does your team look like?
Look, at the moment, we've changed our model slightly, where we were finding that there was some really good talent with some of the contracting groups. So if that's particularly with our labourers. So if I work out all the carpenters and labourers that I have on site today, it's 35 guys. Directly under our banner, it's 22. We have a very lean office. So I have an ops manager who works remotely from home, and I have a project manager who works between sites. So we don't physically have an office that we go and work through. Everything's done remotely, and that's done to minimize costs, maximize efficiency.
Yeah. So talk to me about that then. So that's obviously the point there, to keep overheads low, strategic, I'd assume. Obviously puts less pressure on. You obviously can spit a bit more profit out the other end as well. But obviously it puts less pressure on, doesn't force you to do work you shouldn't really be doing, all that sort of stuff, right? What are some other reasons of why you don't have a nice fancy office?
Look, I think the ego that can come with it, don't get me wrong, there's parts of me that would love to have this great office, and I certainly see there's some upside with growth, and it maybe is something that we do in the future. But for where we are now, I just see it as an extra overhead. We didn't know what was going to happen when the pandemic hit. It did go the opposite way to what I think we all thought it was going to go, particularly with the construction industry. So, yeah, I guess it put us in a spot where if we keep things lean, then when it comes to our margin is for the most part sort of fixed at one rate for all of our projects, depending on value of project. Obviously, the lower the value, the higher the margin. But if I get to a stage where prices are increasing astronomically like they did during COVID, it also means that we can sit with our clients, and if we've got a cost plus contract, but there's a 30, 40, 50% increase in material costs like there was over that time frame, I don't have these enormous overheads that I have to no, sorry, that's the price. I can work with my clients. Or it might be like, look, okay, the white goods, we don't need to charge a margin on those items. It's not all selfless, because some of those items, I don't really want the responsibility long term for when the fridge breaks down. I've got to call Winnings or Harvey Norman or whoever and chase it up. It's client's responsibility. It doesn't mean that we take any less care, or when we're installing the items, and we take all of our responsibility on that end. But when it comes to warranty issues, sometimes it's easier left with the client anyway.
Yeah, makes more sense. So it's just more flexibility as well as...
More flexibility.
Yeah.
We don't have the massive overheads. It also, it gives you the ability, if you don't have massive overheads, I feel like you can shrink and expand the business depending on the market. Whereas if your top end costs are so enormous, as you said, you have to take on jobs you otherwise wouldn't want to take on. And that's not necessarily a lesser dollar value, but it's potentially a lesser percentage value on a higher value project. And I think people go wrong when it comes to looking at the numbers. Like, it's very easy to look and go, oh, that's a $10 million house. Yeah, but how much are you going to make out of it? Like, what are your preliminaries? What are your hire costs? How have you structured your contract to make sure that you're actually going to make money? Your margin on top of that. Oh, but your project manager wasn't. Like, where are you sitting with all these allowances? You need to know what your hard number is at the bottom of the sheet, and what you're making down there. You can't just load up the fancy office, the fancy trucks. I see people that drive around as soon as the market starts booming. You know, you see every bloke in Sydney's driving a brand new Ranger or a brand new Hilux. My car's 7. It's a beautiful Hilux, but 7 years old, because I haven't felt the need to get a new one because it still presents really well.
Yeah, yeah, and I know. And what you're touching on there is kind of a little bit of ego, right? How much have you struggled with ego in the past, and do you see it sometimes as a problem out there in terms of, like, because chasing revenue is a bit of like an ego number, you know? Who cares really?
Yeah.
Because it's only really the money you're going to be putting in your pocket at the end of the day that really matters. If you're looking purely at the financial side of it, how big of a role has ego played in your career?
Yeah, enormous. That's how I got to this position. Like, I'm saying, like, where I sort of now look at it and say, oh, look, I had a company as a Kiwi. You'll like this one. Well, Kiwi, South Africa.
Yeah, well, you can call me either or, you know, tomato.
My first business was actually called Big Decks Australia.
Well, there you go. Great answer.
So it was Big Decks Australia, and we had the slogan on the t-shirt was "Everyone wants a big deck." And it was a really successful little business, but I didn't understand business. But I had the cool business cards. I had every bit of merch that you could possibly think of. Singlets that said, "Call me if you want a big deck," with my like, disgraceful, really. Like, in hindsight, thinking about it. The sign written ute. Now I went from that. I bought another sign written ute. It was all about the branding and how it looked, not about what I was actually making or what the return was for. But look, all the things with client, what with the deliverables were all there. That never failed. But I also didn't know how to run a business, so I I wasn't necessarily making any money, but it looked like I was.
Yeah.
And I looked cool.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very, I love that, Big Dicks Australia. Yeah, you got to send me a T-shirt. Go find like an old
I might actually have a couple.
a couple of key rings or something if I have some merch left. A mug, or something like that. But yeah, so no, yeah, ego is a big one, eh? And if you could, I mean, in life as well, if you could park that, it's never really, I mean, a lot of people think that you need a bit of ego or whatever, but I don't think in the long run really serves you well. To be, because you're always going to get caught up in the wrong things that don't really matter.
Yeah.
So so no, that's super important. In terms of your quality, like you say you have over 20 guys, but first I'm going to ask you a bit about how you maintain that quality. But what's your crew mix in terms of qualified versus unqualified? In terms of the guys' work that's on your books, not necessarily the labourers.
So we have a really strong apprenticeship program. I think Australian government needs to do more when it comes to training. They've had some great systems back in the past. I feel like they've gone away from it a little bit, and I feel like the industry as a whole, it's going to be diabolical not in 20 years' time, in 5 years' time. Like, it's getting really, really bad. So we try to harbour our guys. The only problem with that ego perspective is we train these guys up so well. And I say guys, that's guys and girls. We have had a female apprentice as well.
Cool.
We train them up so well that we put them in a position where they can do their own thing. I came to terms with my ego on this a while ago, that's the greatest compliment, if these individuals are at that stage where they can do that. So now it's with blessing and whatever advice needs to come with it from our team, like moving forward. When it comes to these individuals on site, we've got an apprentice, generally with at least two qualified. So you have a leading hand and a foreman at a bare minimum. We've got a couple of projects at the moment. We've got about 6 carpenters on that site and 2 apprentices.
Right.
And then obviously the structure of that on site, the foreman, we then have outside of our 35, say, guys we've got on site today, we might have 100 guys on across our sites that are of various trades at the moment. The foreman dictates what he needs, obviously, to our carpentry team, but then he also, when I'm not there, runs the other trades to make sure they're set up to do everything they need to do. The apprentices are told to learn the process, not just the task that's in front of them. So whilst the foreman is, instructing these other individuals or trades to do their work, the apprentices are told to look and learn and understand that process so that when they come sort of to the end of their time, they're not just, nailing pieces of timber together. They're looking at the entirety of building a house.
Yeah. I love that, because it's contextually, apprentices don't know what the heck's going on for like the first 18 months, really contextually. They just kind of do a task, get onto the next task, if they do like a bit of their book work and maybe they find a little bit of context, but the fact that you kind of explain to them the process where things fit in, I assume, right? It's much easier to kind of get your head around the task that you're doing if you know where it all fits in.
And it baffles me that, like, building is process.
Yeah.
And building, like, really, I get tripped up on this all the time. Building is really hard to do it really well, to blend all of the elements to execute, a beautiful product. But building is process. And if you really break it down simply, it's not that hard. You start off your base. And a base doesn't necessarily have to be from the ground. Like, you might be framing a head out for a door. So it's understanding that you set out, making sure everything's square, making sure that whatever your base is secured properly. You start from those basic principles, and then you start working into elements like the building code of, look, at this stage within the process, we need a termite barrier. At this stage within the process, we need to get the waterproofers out here to do a water stop angle because water's your number one enemy. We always need to stop this. You start explaining that within that 18-month period to an apprentice, and you're setting them up for their entire career. They don't get 18 months into it. They're preconditioned to know a task and they're not thinking about that. You get them when they're really, really green and start thinking. But it takes the individual to actually want to take that on as well. Not everybody is that interested. And that's why we don't have the numbers in the trades or in the apprenticeships at the moment.
Yeah, that makes sense, because otherwise just like, pull that out, get that at the back of the ear, pull this here, put that, get that in, do that. It's just sort of like treating them a little bit like an idiot.
Yeah.
Just do that, carry that over there. And they might as well be learning as they go, right? So I think that's a really, really good process and way of doing that. Okay. So so everything's processed. So it's kind of like building a cake, right? You don't just put the yeast in, later on you're going to find out what we put the yeast in, right? When it's not rising or not, Quality. How do you, when you grow from 1 project to 2 projects to 5 projects at a time or whatever, how many projects do you guys run at a time?
We try to run about 4 or 5.
Yeah.
At the moment, I think we've got more than that. But it's just because the way that everything was staged and delays with like materials and
yeah. And so how do you maintain that quality? Because you work on beautiful architectural type projects, right?
Correct.
High detail, a lot of problem solving that's almost hard to scale because it's like very like you need to like solve all little detail problems and things like that.
Yeah.
So how do you maintain quality when you have so many projects going on?
This kind of relates back to that conversation around critical mass and, how do you, if your phone's ringing for that amount of time, how do you, I need to make sure that I have the brain capacity to deal with these questions when they come in. So there'll be certain things that I'll be asked that aren't directly, in front of me or they're not now. And it's prioritizing that in my head to say, just park it. I'll come back to it. I need to give this attention because it's a decision that needs to be made now, or, the bookkeepers need this. You do that. I need to do this now. That's from my perspective. It's obviously not about me. It's about the entire team that's on site. We have, as I said, really good foremen on our jobs. They've, for the most part, all worked for me for a number of years, and they've gone through a process where they've worked with another foreman who knows certain certain details are replicated across every project. So once you've nutted out those processes, it becomes a little bit more of a paint by numbers, but you're just replicating it on a different site with slightly different conditions. I had another point there. What was it going to be?
So you don't none of your stuff is documented necessarily. It's more like a cultural, you kind of come up. It's more like, like the what would Jesus do things. Yeah. It's more like, what would Marshall do? They know what you would do rather than it being documented.
Yeah, this is a bit of a misconception within the industry. Everyone, what you've got architects, really high level architects who their level of documentation is unbelievable. And they will work out every connection detail and every little, every sort of minute part. For the most part, we work with designers. Now, designers are a lot more conceptual, and we're not presented detailed drawings, even though they might be referred to as detailed drawings. They're basically pictures of the detail that they want to achieve. It's then up to the professionals that are working among my team and a team of subcontractors who can then execute that. So that might be we liaising with the joiner to the stonemason to the metal fabricator. So it takes on a different role. And I think for the most part, people aren't aware of that. So, and even when it comes to a cost point, people will often say, oh, but why is that more expensive? Well, but for my company, we will probably make less money than the other guy that's charging less, but we're putting twice as much material into it and twice as much time to execute exactly what you want. Which at the end of the build, you'll see the difference.
Yeah. So, okay. So, because it's not as easy if you don't have final architectural drawings of everything. You kind of have to like a lot of problem solving. So I'm just
Yeah.
kind of, so it's not to, so they don't necessarily call you every time to solve it. You have guys that can solve it up to a certain point.
Look, I mean, for the most part, but look, when I'm still very hands on. So when it comes to these details, and the areas of high risk will be anything that is associated with water. So waterproofing issues, I'll always be across. I want to physically see. I also go to site every day on my projects. So, and I make that a point. So there's no. You're not being, the client's not being handed to a foreman who then they liaise with through the duration of the build. I'm always the point of contact, and I go to site every day and liaise with my foreman in that respect, as well as the project manager who takes some of those burdens away from me.
Yeah. How do you get most of your projects then, Marshall? What is it all referral? Is it with marketing? What do you guys do?
Predominantly referral.
And so it's all about doing a great job, and then that's going to get you the next job.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we aim for, and we've got a pretty good track record of keeping people happy. Beginning of this year, I went on a trip with two of my clients,
Cool.
which was really fun. We get invited over for Christmas drinks and so forth. So I feel like if that's happening, we're doing a good job.
Yeah.
But this is a game of personalities as well. I mean, you can bend over backwards for people, like in any industry, and there can be like sometimes relationships don't gel. We don't have it very often, but I think even the selection process of who you're going to work with, I feel it's equally as important for us. If I'm meeting a client, that I need to feel like there's a rapport that I want to work with them. Then I've got to consider my entire team and how they will interact with my team. There's like, it's not just that, oh great, there's a job, we want to take it on. I consider a lot of different aspects before we'll say yes to a project.
Yeah, 100%. You really got to, because it's a long time, right? A year, 18 months, 2 years, you can be on a project, and if you don't gel well, it's going to be kind of hell, right?
It's horrible for everyone. It can be the most fun experience. Like building can be so fun, as it's probably the biggest investment. It's someone's home, it's someone's shelter, it's their personality that they're putting into it, or it can be absolutely horrible, and it can be horrible for the team on site as well.
What do you do to improve your conversion rate from, you meet a potential client, and I assume, do they come through an architect or they come directly to you? What's the normal path?
For the most part, our clients, they come from other clients. I would say that's our
right.
Yeah. So the referrals would be, say I've built for someone in Paddington, they've got a friend around the corner, call this person. We do get a lot of inquiries from Instagram as well.
That's good.
Yeah, it is. And then there's designers. There'll be there's a funny one with designers as well, though, because sometimes other designers won't reach out because they feel like we work exclusively with another designer who they might be friends with, and they don't want to tread on their toes,
right.
Which I kind of like as well. It means
yeah.
that not everyone's out there just trying to undercut or take everyone else's talent.
People are a bit considered, so that's good. So how do you then, so I assume your conversion rate's extremely high then. So if a client comes to, or what do you do to improve that conversion rate when you meet with a client? I assume you grab a coffee, you go to their house or whatever, you walk around if they're looking to do a big renovation or a new build. So how do you ask a lot of questions? Like, what do you want to know from a prospective client, like in order to demonstrate your value in the best way?
I guess that very informal conversation that we have, it is about gelling with them. I'll obviously look at the design and what they want to achieve. That will be a major part of it, because like say for example, someone was doing some really crazy modern home with louvers, and it probably isn't my team's strength. So I'd be honest. Or if the project is too small, I'd be honest. When it comes to conversion, we had something. It was ridiculous. I think we'd had in 5 years, I think we'd converted every project bar one or something. But we also, when it comes to the pricing of the job, we're 100% transparent. So there's nothing that isn't shown to the client. So even when we're doing our bookkeeping, we have bookkeepers that reconcile everything to the cent. We're developing our systems on a daily basis, where now we send that report every week with the invoice. So you've got attached to the invoice, you've got a photocopy of every single invoice that's been purchased for the job, an expense sheet that's got it reconciled to the cent, a package sheet with over under contingency where we're sitting. So we try to push that angle where there's been so many, there's been a bit of a, whether it's right or wrong, there's been an expectation that builders are taking the piss and, and ripping people off. And unfortunately, I think it has happened far too much for and the quality of work not being good enough. We're trying to break the mold where we say we deliver an amazing product and here is all our information on cost, and go through it with a fine-tooth comb. If you find an error, then we'll rectify it immediately.
So do you guys do cost plus? Do you, like open book, you don't do any fixed price contracts?
I did one a little while ago, and it's too hard. I don't like doing it because it doesn't allow for change. And if there is change, it comes at a massive cost. Look, and other builders would hate hearing this because I know that's how a lot of people run their businesses. It's not how we run ours, and right or wrong. I do cost plus. If someone wants to make a change or they need a variation, there's no variation cost unless it pushes to a time change. It's just a swap out and a swap back in of whatever they want. If I'm doing a lump sum, I need to load it up because the market was so volatile over that COVID period that the increases, if you were on lump sum contracts, you're probably lucky to still be in business at this point in time.
Especially during that time, there was like about an 18-month period there. It was just like a lot of people taking a lot of big hits because it's fixed, and now the material price increases were just ridiculous, and everything was just and time delays and all of that sort of stuff. What's the numbers that you look at that's most important to you in the business? Whether could be accounts, could be head count, could be whatever. What sort of the numbers that tells you the story whether things are on track or not?
The most important number is the overall percentage of profit, and then from there we can kind of work out what was lacking or where we went wrong. On a weekly basis, we will have all of the hours and so forth for the guys and what they've worked. There's a very simple calculation of what they're charged at versus what they make. Again, for Team Unity, I've basically taken the charge out rates that I'm giving to the clients and I factor it so that basically that amount of money goes to the individual worker. We pay superannuation for all of our full-time staff as well, which I know a lot of companies haven't done. So I'll look at those numbers to make sure that they're stacking up. That's a really simple one. There should be a small percentage over, which is, can I swear on this?
Yeah.
It's a fuck up tax, basically. Yeah. If something goes wrong. But I also would hope that our guys are good enough that we don't have to jump into that. Really, when it comes down to it, at the end of the column, I'll see if we're working, we predominantly work off a 15% margin. So I want the company profit to be around that 15%. If that's down 7% or something, I'm going to be asking questions, what was missed in reconciliation or where did we fuck up?
And is that gross or net?
That's gross.
Gross. And then, okay. And
no. So gross is 15. But if I'm looking at our percentage profit, by the time I've factored in my like I just do an hourly rate for what I charge to clients. that sort of offsets a little bit of the other percentage shift. So
Yeah.
we would be wanting to hit net because of our lean operational costs. We don't have major expenses. So I want it to be somewhere on the south side of 15. So maybe it's 12, 13%.
Right, yeah, because your overheads are so low.
low.
The difference between your net
Yeah.
and gross is
Yeah.
minimal. Yeah. Okay. That's really good. That's really good. What's the biggest financial hit that you've taken since you started your business?
I took a massive one. In post GFC, I was basically wiped. But I got out of it and I promised to pay everyone back, but I had to sell a couple of houses to do it.
How much was wiped? What is that?
Oh, like everything I had. And then I basically had to pay everyone with checks from the Solicitor's Trust account. And then I had about $250,000 left. I was only 30 at the time.
Yeah.
So I just had to took the next 10 years to sort of pay everyone back that amount. It's a lot easier to come back from zero than it is from a negative. Then, built it back up. My first job in Sydney, I got done for 120 grand, which was brutal.
Are you able to just how long does it take you to get over that?
Then it's hard. It's really hard because I think there's this magic belief that, you just pull the money, money. I've had conversations with the ATO where I've had clients that haven't paid me and owe me money, and quote, "We'll just get the money." Where do I get it from? To the ATO person on the phone. Well, can't you just get it? I'm like, where from? The hardest hit though, when it comes to the money, is the team that you have working for you. Like, we pay our guys every Friday, and we're in a system where we basically pay all of our subcontractors every single Friday or before Friday. So we might do bills Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And I try to clear my bills, that everything is in my outstanding bills. I try to clear that every week. So if you invoice me on Monday, you'll get paid on Friday.
Wow.
So
that's great.
And that because I don't want that stress going back home and creating its own social issues either. I want those guys to go home feeling appreciated, respected enough. They've done the work to get paid. They should be getting paid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that, And it's sort of like, people always say life's short, but I've actually come to realize, especially in business and everything, life's quite long because people come and go and reputations stick and you know what I mean? And you've obviously learned from the GFC and you're obviously implementing a lot of the learnings from that into now.
Yeah.
And knowing that it's important to, there's things that are important, like making sure you guys are paid and all that sort of thing. And, because 10 years from now, someone's going to be talking about it and it's very important.
Yeah. Well, it creates that brand. It's brand loyalty on a different sense to the consumer. It's the brand loyalty for the trades, and they're our most important asset. Like, you talk about the dying number of tradespeople out there. So to secure these individuals or these groups and have them with respect for my company and my team, and loyalty where we call them and they show up, that's what's dying. And the reason it's dying is people forget that they need to be paid, and they need to be paid on time.
Yeah.
I don't know too many people who are motivated by not being paid. There's this belief in construction that a client goes, "Oh, well, you haven't finished that component, so I'm not going to pay you an entire, outstanding invoice." Well, that's not the greatest motivation, I wouldn't think.
Yeah, you've just sapped all the motivation out of it.
You've taken all, and if they're telling you that they can't do it because someone's not available, well, that person is forced to go somewhere else where they will be paid. So you probably slid back down. So they might want to get to you, but they need the money, so they're going elsewhere to get it.
Yeah, people don't understand you got to push their motivation buttons, right? Like what's going to motivate them, not what you're doing right now. It's not really helping.
Yeah.
You won't believe it, but we're almost gone past an hour. Oh. I feel like we could talk for hours if we wanted to. But I've got some rapid fire questions I want to shoot your way, Marshal, if you wouldn't mind.
Have you got what you want thus far?
Yeah, 100%.
Cool.
Have you enjoyed yourself?
Yeah,
Has it been fun?
Yeah, it's been good.
Yeah, it's good. It's been really good fun for me. I've definitely enjoyed it. So feel free to pass on it or tell the truth or lie if you want. But it's just sort of like, yeah, it's just to kind of get a bit of a snapshot of your side. Okay, so remind me, how big is your team?
22 to 35.
And what's your crew mix between qualified, unqualified?
It's predominantly qualified.
Cool. How many projects did you complete last year?
I think we did 15 last year.
Crazy. And give me an idea, what's the sort of average project that you work? Obviously, sometimes they're smaller if you're filling the gaps, but what's sort of like an average project for you guys?
Average project's about 2 million.
Yeah.
2 to 2.5.
Yeah. And what's sort of like an average, I'm just sort of adding these in now as I'm thinking, what's sort of like an average square meter rate on what you guys are working on at the moment out there? I mean, you don't have to give you, but just in general in Sydney.
This is, look, I think for the most part, everyone that does the math at the moment is coming in at like that 10, and then obviously the more extravagant the finishes, the needle goes up that way very quickly.
Yeah. Okay, turnover, just a range. Are you under 1 mil, 1 to 3, 3 to 5, 5 to 7, 7 to 10, or 10 mil plus?
10 mil plus.
Cool. What's the lowest gross profit margin building companies you reckon should be aiming for?
I think you want to be hitting 15 at least. But again, well, no, sorry, stand corrected. It's all about if you're doing 10 mil, then your percentage can be lower. If you're doing 1 mil, then your percentage needs to be higher. So it's not about the percentage. It's about the gross. Yeah. The gross income or the gross revenue.
Free quote or paid quote?
Free.
QS?
But precursor, I won't tender a project, and it's not through arrogance. It's just I want relationships, and we're good at what we do. So if you want to work with us, we want to work with you. It's about if we're the preferred. We don't necessarily have to get the job, but I'd like to be told that we're the preferred builder, and then I'll do whatever's needed. Get you some numbers. Otherwise, I'd rather just give you. I'd rather look at the plans and help you out and say that's what it's going to be, and send me the other guy's quote, and I'll tell you if he's ripping you off or not.
Yeah. So it's more like committing to one another. I will commit to you, and you commit to us, and QS or price yourself?
I'm yet to find a QS that gets the intricacies right on renovations, which is what we predominantly do. I think if a QS on a new build, absolutely fantastic. For us on our stuff,
too hard.
Yeah.
Project management software or spreadsheets?
Spreadsheets.
Fixed price contract or charge up?
Yeah, charge up, cost plus.
Texting or talking on the phone?
50-50, depending on who they are.
Would you rather have a beer with an architect, a subby, or council member?
Subby.
Subby's always win, eh? Jock or hippie?
Jock.
Wine or whiskey?
Both.
These days, building business owners are too impatient, forward thinkers, or hard workers.
Sorry, repeat that one again.
Building business owners, young guys coming up, are either too impatient, forward thinkers, or hard workers.
I think for the most part, too impatient.
It's the Instagram world, right? Everyone wants to just get there fast. Are you too mean or too nice to your staff?
I think I hit a pretty sort of neutral position.
Okay. Well,
you know what? No, I'm certainly not mean. Actually, I don't. If I got called mean, I'd be offended.
Yeah. Well, guys, if you're listening, maybe put a little comment in there. Do you have a favorite business book or resource?
No, my favorite resource, it often comes from the clients that we have. I've got some amazing clients. Like I've worked for some of the big head CEOs, in business in Australia. Using them as a resource is my greatest tool.
That's great, because they're obviously successful in their own right.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I've read a lot of books and so forth like about this, but I think what you can get, actually there's one person that stands out from years ago, a guy by the name of Bob Holland, and he was the head of Corinthian Homes like years ago. I was project manager on a development site, and Bob would say he was a construction manager, which doesn't make sense because he was way further, way higher up the hierarchy than I was. But he would sit in a meeting and say nothing and that with all consultants, highly paid consultants. And when he spoke, you could hear a pin drop. This guy was one of the most remarkable men, and I used to pick his brain all the time.
Right. Normally the guys that know the most, eh? The
Yeah.
most quiet. Since you sometimes like to text, what's your most used emoji? You have to be honest as well.
The laughing face.
Not like the eggplant or anything.
No.
Awesome. Who has inspired you the most in business or in life?
Probably my mum. Yeah.
Cool. Why is that?
Just her work ethic, second to none. She did a lot as a single mum. She worked her bum off. She worked from, taking my brother and I to school first thing in the morning to getting home, having a client in the driveway when we were working through till 10:30 at night. Nothing was ever too hard.
Awesome. Good on you, mum. Okay. Did you have fun?
I did.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much, Marshall, for coming on. And I think a lot of guys would have got a lot out of that, and it was real fun for me as well. So appreciate it, man.
Mate, my pleasure. Thank you so much. No, I had a really good time.
Cheers, man.
Cheers.